What is up, guys? It's Wednesday, and that means it's paintball question time! How paintball sponsorships work, the difference between low-end and high-end guns, and low-pressure and high-pressure tanks. Mark CQ asked, Brad, how do paintball sponsorships work? Got picked up on a D3 team and not sure how it works. So it's gonna vary, right? It depends on what team you're on and how it works. So it's kind of hard for me to specifically say how your team works, but let's go over like some of the basic sponsorship things and I guess things you can expect from companies and fields and stores and stuff. So nowadays there's a lot of companies offering sponsorships, right? You really just have to have 5 people and a paintball company will sponsor you. 2 of the bigger sponsorship programs are gonna be through GI Sports with their Imperial program, and then Valken with their VPC program, the Valken Player Choice Program. With the Imperial program, GI's program, it's gonna be on specific GI or Empire products. So their bundled packages are gonna be for like the Empire Vanquish, Empire Axe, and you get to choose your tank, choose your hopper, choose your mask, pack and stuff. But you have to all buy those packages, right? So there's 5 ESA, everyone is gonna have to buy a package. I don't think they have to be the same package. You could have a guy choose the Vanquish package or the Axe package, but they're gonna expect and they want everybody on that team to be buying and wearing Empire or GI gear. And those packages typically are gonna be 20-ish% off retail prices. So when bundled together, it's kind of a good deal. One of the better things about the GI program is that at tournaments, if you're playing in the NXL or Millennium, you get discounted prices on paint depending on which packages you guys went with. So say if you went with the Vanquish packages, you'd get deeper discounts on paint. And they also, if you win, say you win that tournament and we're buying GI paint, they will refund you 100% of your paint, and then if you get second, they give you 50% back. Valken's program I probably like the most. So Valken has that same thing where you're getting bundled packages at different price levels, but they give you more options. With Valken, you can choose from like Eclipse products, Valken products, dye stuff, Luxes and Shockers, so you have more options. Say you could go with a Lux, a dye rotor, a dye mask, a Valken tank, whatever it is, you can kind of mix up between those 3 brands, or 5 brands. So it's kind of cool, they give you more variety, and then expect that still 20-ish% discount on all that stuff. But to my knowledge, I don't think Valken's doing like a paint rebate thing, where you get like paint free if you win the tournament, so you might wanna look into that. There's also companies like Eclipse and Virtue who are also doing their own sponsorships, but definitely the Imperial program and the VPC program are the 2 most popular from paintball manufacturers at least. But then there's also probably the more common way that teams are getting sponsored is through fields and stores. And they're gonna be kind of similar, say, to those other programs where you just get discounts. So maybe a paintball store is gonna give you, I don't know, 15% off everything, or like $10 off paint or something like that. And then the field's gonna do roughly the same thing. Maybe you get $10 off entry or cheaper field paint or whatever it is. But in reality, most of these paintball sponsorships are all just discounts. You're not like getting free stuff for the most part. You have to be like top 3 semi-pro team or pro to ever expect free stuff. Like it's never gonna happen. Like why would GI Sports just give you guys guns and paint? Like what's in it for them? Nothing really. I mean, you're D3, so you're not gonna get lots of exposure and like media coverage, so it's just not worth it to them. So you're still gonna pay for everything. So I don't know about these sponsorship things though. I don't really like them. Like you guys, right? You're D3, so you have good guns and good tanks and all this stuff. So why spend the extra money to do the Imperial program or the VPC program? It's just more money you have to spend where you could use that like $1,500 or whatever it is to play more tournaments, play more paintball. So I don't like the sponsorships. Maybe field and store sponsorships okay because they're not asking you to like give them a bunch of money up front. They're just like, hey, if you spend money, we'll give you guys a deal. So I think working with local fields and stores is probably a better idea than going with some of these big companies and getting sponsored by them, because you're just gonna pay for a bunch of stuff you might not need. Yeah, that's sponsorships. Rich M asked, I can only afford the Proto Rize. Apart from the screen, will the M2 have any advantage on the field? Yeah, a little bit maybe. I feel like that's more of a question about what the difference is between like $300 paintball gun and $1,500 guns. So the difference between like mid-rangey entry-level tournament style guns and high-end ones. As the years have gone on, it's really gotten kind of hard to explain the difference between like these mid-range entry-level-ish tournament guns and these high-end guns. Like they're not substantially different anymore. I do think what you're getting with those high-end guns though is increased reliability for sure. I think that like comparing the Rise at least to the M2 is going to be more reliable. They're also typically a little more air efficient, maybe a little lower pressure, so that lower pressure is going to make them a little quieter, maybe shoot a little smoother, kick a little bit less, and then be a little easier on paint. Feature-wise, stuff's going to be better. So like the M2 you said has that screen, so it's just nice. It's easier to change modes and settings. Barrels are typically going to be better. The M2 has that quick release bolt. So there's a couple feature things that just kind of make them nicer and better overall. That overall build quality makes them just feel better and maybe hold up over time a little more. The M2 specifically does have that low pressure regulator, so you can kind of tune in the settings to maybe make it a little easier on paint, or if you're playing in like 30-degree weather, having that low pressure regulator on the M2, you can crank that thing up a little bit and make it cycle a little bit better in colder weather comparatively to like the Proto Rise. It's difficult. There isn't like something written on paper or like a spec sheet that's gonna make it look like it's worth that extra $1,000. I think the best way to kind of like feel and tell the difference is gonna be feel the difference, right? Go out and try to shoot the thing. I think that's where you're gonna notice the biggest difference is just shooting and playing with the thing. But essentially, they're not that much different. M2's better, but is it worth that $1,000? I don't know. To me, yeah, I'm gonna spend the money on the M2, but for you it might not be, so go feel it. That might not have been helpful, but I tried. Jason Radford asked, I just picked up an LV1, should I use a high pressure or low pressure tank? So I think low pressure. I found a comment or a statement, we'll say, by Jack Wood, the main guy who actually built that gun. Let's read that back. I would always recommend the tank reg be set to 450 to 500 PSI. That goes for the V1 and V2. He's talking about the Ninja Pro regulators. This is due to the AT pipe and the LV1/GSL POPS-to-Frame interface. A lower pressure tank output is more reliable for these seals. Yep, so I guess if you have a Planet Eclipse gun with that AT pipe, you should just use low pressure for that reason. There's a couple other reasons to use low pressure, not mainly just because Jack Wood says to on the AT pipe. So whether you have any gun, I always feel that like low pressure tanks just kind of like feel and work better on high-end or mid-range electric guns. So if your gun works at like 200 PSI, that regulator on that gun is gonna work a little bit better, maybe a little more consistent with about double the input pressure. So if your regulator's 200, yeah, about 400, 450-ish PSI, that inline regulator is just gonna work a little bit more efficiently. And efficient, I don't mean like more shots, just like it's not gonna waste as much, or it's just gonna work correctly a little better. You could also think that like if your tank regulator is creeping, so if it's at 500 PSI and then that pressure is creeping up because of a worn out O-ring or something's damaged inside, it could creep up 200 PSI and then it's at 700 PSI. If it's at 800, that typical high pressure output, and creeps up 200 PSI, your tank regulator is now outputting 1000 PSI. And then most inline regulators aren't really designed to take that high of pressure, so you could be causing damage to like solenoids or parts inside the gun. So having it low pressure is like maybe a good safety measure to prevent damaging stuff if you have regulator fail problems or creeping. We've also heard Ninja recommend low pressure for most of these high-end or mid-range guns. Ninja's also said that they recommend doing low pressure on most of these like mid-range and high-end guns, as they've tested like a lot of inline regulators and tank regulators, and they found that that 450 to 550 PSI output pressure on tanks works a little better with inline regulators. So to me, I'm gonna take Ninja's word for it and trust that low pressure tanks are the way to go. Paintball question time, guys. That's all we got. Do check out more paintball question times right up there to my left, or the Paintball Ruin My Life store to pick up a sweet Paintball Ruin My Life t-shirt, or do and subscribe by hitting that circle button.